me.
Some of us still have
Open.
alarm clocks.
Yeah. I have a dog that's mad at me. It's delaying my mornings. Good morning. This morning is Corrections and Code Enforcement Committee. It is March 28th, 2024. Present today are Councilman Schramm and Hockett.
Opening day.
Appointed officials, opening day of baseball. There you go. City Attorney Paul Jensen, Finance Officer Chandra Phillips, Public Safety Commissioner Justin Day, Public Works Director. We're missing one. Kidding. Jail Administrator Jeff, the man Augsburger, and Mr. Rehak. I want to say Lieutenant. Technically a lieutenant, but John in charge of our medical department in the corrections department. So, the lieutenant, the man. Yeah, my dog put me in a mood. Oh, I'm sorry, Dan, I forgot you were here. Dan Furness.
Don't worry, I'm here.
Code enforcement.
All right. Well,
We have
thank
a
you,
full
Mr.
house
Mayor.
today.
We will go ahead and get started this morning. I will turn it over to Jeff to go ahead and start with corrections.
So yeah, we'll start with our inmate population. Today's count's 153, month average is 155, and for the year, we're sitting at 162. We submitted, and that may have been reported, but we'll talk about it a little briefly here. We submitted the IGA USM contract on the 15th of March. We did get correspondence back on March 21st, just letting us know that they received it, and they're starting the process on their end. Their goal is to get through it as quick as possible. They do say that they can take 60 to 90 days. But if it was our experience last time, Justin Chandra, didn't we, it was a few weeks?
I was wanting to think it was 6 weeks, but,
6 weeks.
2 weeks before they responded the first time and then. 6
Help me
weeks.
out with IGA, please.
The intergovernmental agreement with
Okay, thank you.
U.S. Marshals.
Yep.
Are we,
It was just over 30 days because we had to go prorate it back to April 1st, and it was like early May.
what increase are we looking at? That we just.
We're not going to
Can we talk
talk,
about that?
we can talk about that later after the session is done.
So yeah, they have it, and
Poker Joe
hoping to hear back from them and
showing her hand.
answer any questions they have, adjust if anything necessary. Sometimes we got to tweak how we listed certain items, whether it's expenditure or if they have questions on, revenue or whatnot. And Chandra helps a lot with that. So yeah, we're waiting on hear from them on that. And then the last thing I had for you was I put in an application to host a pepperball class. We have one instructor currently for pepperball, and this year he needs to be recertified as an instructor. There's a class this summer in Mobridge, but talking with Justin, it's our goal, if we can host a training here locally, that other law enforcement can, come to Winter and also receive that instruction, training, certifications. That's kind of the goal. With this process, if we're granted it, we also get 2 free seats. So although we budgeted for some training, this is a bonus if we were to host it, and then it doesn't cost us anything. So we're going to try to go that route first. I'm going to try to get that scheduled and solidified with them for later in the year. And if we can't for some reason, then we'll be sending JJ to Mobridge in the summer. But that was really the only thing I had for you guys today. Any questions?
Not official questions. Those come later. Right.
Okay, then next we will turn it over to Dan in code enforcement.
So, code enforcement, I've been looking at the trailer parks and where they're coming up short as far as the requirements that we have that the park itself is supposed to maintain. I found quite a few areas where the park itself is coming up short, and that's something that Paul and I need to sit down and have a conversation about yet. But that is something I have been working on. So I thought I'd share that with you guys. And then Chief DeVork and I sat down and we talked about parking, specifically like where his department ends and where mine begins. And we figured that out and outlined it and got it defined, so, between the two of us, so that we can move forward with some of those nuisances that we've been talking about in the last couple of weeks, so.
Any questions, council?
Just a comment, communication between you guys are critical, you know, for the administration of the city.
Absolutely, and yeah,
For what we're trying to get done, you guys need to be, you know,
I'm pretty fortunate that we have a pretty good relationship we have for years, so. Be able to use that to our advantage to move forward on this, so.
Wow,
That's all I have.
interesting.
Well, the one on 18 looks pretty tough. The
Which one?
trailer park on Highway 18
Yeah.
looks pretty tough. Yep.
Yeah, it's not just that one. Both of them are bad. There's definitely areas, when the city outlined what their expectations are for a trailer park, we're definitely not meeting them in both places. So I think that's some things that need to be addressed. I just don't know the process of how we'll do that, but that's something that Paul and I will figure out.
looks to me like they're clearing out, you know, like they're gearing up for shutting down or something out there. You can sense that it's not a, you know, it's not a full-blown active trailer park. It looks to me like, I don't know, is that correct or not? Or is there a bunch of empty spaces now than there used to be?
There's significantly more empty spaces than there used to be. I'm not sure what the future is going to hold for that place exactly. I mean, I've heard mumblings both ways, and so I don't know for sure what's going to happen. And I've heard both ways from my contact at Redco, who owns that specific park.
They haven't shared with you any direction that they're heading with that part of winter?
They have,
That you can
but then
share now?
They have, but then I don't want to say anything because I don't know for sure what direction they're going this week. Because they oftentimes change their mind pretty quickly, so.
One thing that we are doing though is if they come into, if the lot has been off for a while, in either, any of the trailer parks, we actually have 4 in town, then we make them go talk to Dan before we'll even let them sign up for utilities at that point in time. Because we found that trailers were being moved throughout or from out of town into town, all of that, and there are a lot of rules that go with that, that we didn't necessarily, in the utility office, we weren't notifying code enforcement when we found out about some of that, not knowing what some of those rules were. And now that we know what those rules are, we're saying we're not even going to allow them to fill out an application until Dan gives us the go-ahead. And he's got a letter process, and because we learned the hard way, we can't just trust that the person coming from one office to the next is gonna tell the truth. So Dan writes us a letter now, letting us know what his recommendation is, so. And then once he gives us the go-ahead, then we can let them fill out the application, and then we let the utility department, Public Works know that, hey, they want active utilities there, can you turn them on? So.
In this day and age, you kind of have to proceed in that manner. You've got to cover all the bases, it seems to me like now.
Precise.
You cover everything. It's not a gentleman's agreement anymore. You got to lay these things out, and you got to cover them. Everybody's on the same page that way. That works best.
So this is something that came up yesterday too. Dan and Mr. Jensen are aware of it. I haven't had a chance to even tell the mayor about it, but our previous code enforcement officer notified us that the publication in the paper for the recreational trailers was published incorrectly. Now that it was finally published. They left in there the strike-throughs. So there were 2 strike-throughs. We had struck through major recreational vehicles, and then we'd struck through occasional use may be allowed. Somehow they got left in the publication.
With the line through them?
No, without.
Without a line.
Oh, my gosh,
So
oh, my gosh.
all of the new stuff is in there. So I don't know if you heard our conversation previous to the meeting, Dan.
Bits and pieces.
It's fine to proceed on because all the new information is there. We'll have the paper republish it correctly, notifying that, you know, it was published in error, this part was not supposed to be included. And then we'll work that out with the paper on how to better proceed in the future on making sure that if there's a strike through, are they removing it? Do I remove it? I thought previously they were just putting a strike through in it for us. If it was struck through, and that's how we were publishing it, so that people could see what was taken out. If that's not the case anymore, then we'll need to change how we
Yes.
send it. So we are in communication with the paper, but we're still okay to proceed because all the new information was published. So people do read the paper.
What's on the list for parking? You have parking on your thing here.
Yeah, we covered that. I just
Yeah.
wanted to talk about what Chief DeVork and I had talked about and figured out.
Parking where? I must have went to sleep after you talked about trailer parks.
Oh, yeah, no, I just, I mentioned that Chief DeVork and I had sat down, because we've been having some complaints about people working on vehicles in the streets and things like that. And so something that Chief DeVork and I addressed is like where his officers end and where I begin.
Oh, that was the parking discussion?
Yeah,
Dan and I had worked on that probably a month ago.
I wouldn't think doing an oil change in the street has a damn thing to do with parking.
It doesn't.
That ought to be against whatever laws we have.
It is.
Bradley, the car is parked on the street when they're changing the oil, so it does have
Yeah,
to do
but
with
his
parking.
feet are sticking out where
I
I'm
know,
gonna drive,
I
and
know
that's
they
gonna
are.
be a real problem.
But these guys are talking, they're working it out, and that's why, so we don't have these falling through the crack type situations. That's what
Yep.
they're addressing here
Yeah.
going forward, and that's what we need as a city. So that we're all on the same page going forward, so things.
Because we ought to be able to collect damages for every bit of oil that he puts on our asphalt street. Because oil has a tendency to soften asphalt, and thereby our street won't last as long. So if it's not against the law to change your oil on the city street, then we ought to get to work in the ordinance committee and make it against the law.
It is.
Then we ought to start enforcing it, whether it be
that's.
code enforcement or whether it be
That's what I've
city
been working
cop, one or the other.
And that was part of the reason that Dan and I started looking at this together, and he ended up going to talk with Chief DeVork, because within that couple of ordinances that apply, there are certain situations that primarily fall under the jurisdiction of the police department. There are others that primarily fall under the code enforcement. And so we had to make sure that everybody's on the same page, understanding whose role is which, and setting it up so that when Dan observes certain violations, he will notify the police department so they can get on it. Because they can handle some of these things also. Under their provisions, they can handle things so much more quickly, whereas if you go on a different section and handle it through code enforcement, you start out with your notice period, which, 20 days?
Yeah, on that specifically, it's 20 days.
Yeah.
The biggest divide between where the police department ends and where I begin is private property. I handle everything on private property, he handles everything in the street. Is probably the easiest, simplest way to define it. So,
It's pretty clear.
that's kind of what we figured out anyhow. So I know that there was some cloudiness and confusion on that one.
So if I'm gonna understand the process, then you're gonna see the guy changing oil in the street, you're gonna call 911 and say, I got a violation here, go take care of it,
Well,
to make
No,
it
he'll
simple?
probably
I
just-
hope that it doesn't have to come to that. My hope is that the police officer driving down the street sees it and handles it themselves. And then I call Chief DeVork and say, hey, have you seen this? Have your guys addressed this?
Yeah.
And we move forward. That's what we're shooting for. That's the goal.
'Cause I drive by there a lot, every day. And I know I get upset every day that I see it. I'm gonna run over that guy, and it's gonna be my fault, because his feet are sticking out where I'm driving.
There have been communications with that residence, though. I think there's a pretty solid,
Good.
I believe there's a solid understanding at this point. That's the understanding. Now we'll see if there's the follow-through, the accountability. Anything else before,
No, that should do it. Nice, quick meeting.
John?
John, you have a speech you would like to give us?
Not this time. maybe
Okay,
next time.
okay.
Hey, that's more than you
Is your
said the last
street
time.
fixed yet?
We're working more.